If you love intense HFY stories where humanity turns fear into strength, hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next battle. Your support helps this channel bring you more powerful sci-fi stories full of emotion, strategy, and unforgettable human moments. The first thing Rowan Cade noticed about Blackspire Hold was that even the doors looked angry. The alien facility sat half-buried inside the cliffs of Varnix-3, a storm moon where red lightning crawled across the landing pads. The hold was not built to welcome anyone. It was built to survive sieges, bury secrets, and remind visitors that comfort had never been invited to the design meeting. Rowan stepped off the transport ramp in a dark Earth exchange jacket, carrying a dented field tablet and a cup of coffee that already tasted like regret. He looked up at the walls, gun towers, and silent rows of armored alien cadets, then muttered, "Lovely place. Really captures the warmth of a prison that got promoted." The nearest guard turned one narrow silver eye toward him. "Blackspire Hold is a strategic command sanctuary." Rowan nodded. "Right. Prison with better funding." He had not been sent there as a hero, which was fortunate because Rowan considered heroism one of those words people used after planning had failed. His assignment was simple. Observe non-human war support assets during command trials and submit a behavioral risk report to Varkin Military Academy. In normal language, the academy had acquired something dangerous. Nobody could make it listen, and someone had decided a human cadet might notice why. Rowan followed the escort through the yard, passing cadets who stood too straight and spoke too little. Everything in Blackspire moved by command. Doors opened after 3 confirmations. Guards changed position in perfect timing. Rowan glanced at his escort. "Do people laugh here, or is that considered an atmospheric breach?" The escort did not answer. "Good talk," Rowan said. Handler Sira then met him at the lower security lift. She was tall, dark-scaled, and scarred across one side of her jaw, with the tired eyes of someone who had survived combat in committees. Unlike the guards, she did not look at Rowan with contempt. She looked at him like a new problem with legs. "Cadet Rowan Cade," she said, "you have been cleared for restricted observation only. You will not approach the asset, feed the asset, speak to the asset, signal the asset, or attempt human improvisation near the asset." Rowan blinked. "That last one feels targeted." "It is. Fair." The lift dropped through 8 levels of metal, stone, and old warning lights. The lower they went, the quieter the facility became. On level 6, the walls carried impact marks. On level 7, Rowan saw broken command pylons stacked beside a hatch. On level 8, every guard wore a face shield, and no one stood with their back to the main doors. Sira stopped before a reinforced glass overlook. "Before you see Korrath, understand the rule. He is not a beast to be comforted. He is not a prisoner to be pitied. He is a war creature bred for siege disruption and battlefield shock. He ignores vocal commands, rejects neural reins, and has injured 9 handlers during attempted bonding procedures." Rowan looked at the sealed glass. "Attempted bonding procedures. That sounds like a clean phrase for doing something stupid nearby." Sira's jaw tightened. "Do not make jokes in front of him." "Does he hate jokes?" "He hates everything." Rowan's voice softened. "Usually means everything has been awful to him first." Sira opened the overlook. At first, Rowan thought the chamber below was empty. Then the far shadows moved. Korrath rose from the dark like a piece of the moon had learned to breathe. He was enormous, plated in charcoal armor hide with a ridged skull, 4 amber eyes, and folded blade-like spines along his back. Heavy restraint bands circled his chest and forelimbs, though Rowan noticed the chains were slack, not because Korrath was weak, but because everyone understood the chains were mostly a suggestion backed by panic. 2 handlers stood near the lower gate with command rods. One lifted a rod and barked a sharp phrase in military Karun. "Korrath, lower." The creature did not lower. He turned his head slowly and looked at the handler as if deciding whether obedience was worth the insult. The second handler tried a harmonic command. Korrath's lips peeled back just enough to show teeth, and both handlers stepped back. A cadet behind Rowan whispered, "It ignores every command." Another said, "It only responds to pain limits." Rowan did not look back. His eyes stayed on Korrath. The creature was not raging. That bothered him more than rage would have. Korrath was watching the rods, the handler's feet, the distance to the gate, the reflection in the glass, and then, suddenly, Rowan. 4 amber eyes lifted straight to the overlook. Rowan felt the attention land on him like a physical weight. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. "Well," he murmured, "that is not an empty animal." Sira looked sharply at him. "Step back." Rowan did slowly, but he kept watching. Below, Korrath did not roar. He only tilted his head, as if the human was the first strange thing in the room that had not arrived holding a command. Rowan lowered the cup and said quietly, "I don't think he's ignoring orders because he doesn't understand them." Sira asked, "Then why?" Rowan looked at the rods, the scars under the restraint bands, and the creature still staring through the glass. "Because every order he's ever heard came with a threat attached." By the time Rowan Cade finished his first observation cycle, Blackspire Hold had already given him a headache, 3 new reasons to distrust military architects, and one very large question nobody wanted him asking. Korrath had ignored 12 vocal commands, 2 harmonic control pulses, 1 neural rain test, and an officer who had apparently believed volume could substitute for authority. Each failure had been entered into the Academy record as non-compliance. Rowan read the term on his tablet and stared through the reinforced glass at the creature below. Korrath stood in the center of the lower chamber, still as dark stone, the restraint bands across his chest rising and falling with slow breaths. He did not look confused. He looked tired of being wrong in a language everyone else wrote for him. Rowan tapped the record with one finger. "Non-compliance," he muttered. "That's a fancy way to say he understood you and decided your whole personality was a bad idea." Handler Sira then stood beside him with her arms folded. "You were invited to observe, Cadet Cade, not diagnose command failure." Rowan did not look away from the chamber. "Good news, I'm multitasking." Sira's eyes narrowed. "Your report should focus on asset risk. That is what I'm doing." He turned the tablet toward her. Risk Factor 1. Every interaction begins with someone holding a control rod. Risk Factor 2. Every failed command is followed by escalation. Risk Factor 3. Nobody here knows if he can choose cooperation because nobody has offered him anything except obedience or pain. Sira's jaw tightened. "You think this is simple because you have not stood in that chamber." Rowan's sarcasm softened. "No, I think it's complicated because everyone who stands in that chamber brings the same answer." Sira was quiet for a moment, which Rowan counted as progress because nobody had threatened to remove him yet. Then the lower chamber alarm chimed twice. A supply hatch opened near the far wall, and a feeding platform slid out carrying a dense gray nutrient block and a shallow water tray. Korrath did not move. One handler at the lower gate spoke into the amplifier. "Korrath, feed." The creature's eyes shifted toward the hatch, then toward the handler's rod. He stayed still. "Korrath, feed," the handler repeated, sharper this time. Rowan leaned closer to the glass. "You command him to eat," Sira answered flatly. "Routine maintains control." That sentence should be illegal in at least 6 emotional jurisdictions. The handler raised the rod. Korrath's spines lifted. He still did not move toward the food. The rod sparked once. Not touching him, not yet, but promising. Korrath struck the floor with one forelimb and the water tray flipped against the wall, spilling across the stone. The handler cursed. "Refusal again." Rowan watched the spilled water spread toward a drain. "That was not refusal." Sira looked at him. "Then what was it?" Rowan pointed below. He waited until the rod sparked, then hit the nearest thing that would end the command without crossing the chain line. He is not refusing food. He is refusing the ritual attached to it. Sira's expression flickered, but the handler below had already turned away. The nutrient block remained on the platform, untouched. Korrath retreated into the shadow with his eyes still open. Rowan closed his tablet. "Does he always leave it?" "Sometimes." "And then, the chamber crew removes it." Rowan looked at her. "So hunger is part of the conversation." Sira's voice sharpened. "Be careful, human. I'm trying, it's everyone else I'm worried about. That night, Rowan did not sleep. He told himself it was because storm thunder kept shaking the windows of his assigned quarters. Then he told himself it was because Blackspire coffee had the chemical personality of engine solvent. Then, around the third hour, he stopped lying and pulled on his jacket. The lower-level access lock accepted his observer code for the maintenance balcony, which Rowan decided was either an oversight or the facility quietly begging someone to make better choices. He stepped into the dark viewing passage carrying no weapon, no food, and no command device. Only his tablet, a small portable lamp, and the kind of dread that made his humor line up early for duty. This, he whispered to himself, is how reports get footnotes titled Human Incident. Korrath was awake before Rowan reached the rail. Of course he was. 4 amber eyes opened in the dark below, fixed on him with immediate, terrible focus. Rowan stopped outside the chain range and slowly lifted both empty hands. Easy, no rods, no commands, no dramatic bonding ceremony. I am allergic to all 3. The creature did not move, but the air changed around him. Rowan placed the lamp on the floor, not pointed at Korrath, just enough to show his hands and face. Then he sat down with his back against the wall. I'm not telling you to eat, he said quietly. That seems like a weird thing to order a living being to do. I'm just sitting here while nobody orders anything for 5 minutes. Korrath watched him. Rowan watched the empty feeding platform below. Great conversation so far. Very balanced. I provide awkwardness, you provide existential threat. The silence stretched. Rowan did not fill all of it, which took effort because humans had a terrible habit of talking when afraid. Korrath stepped from the shadow after nearly 4 minutes. The chains whispered across the stone but did not tighten. He approached the old nutrient block still lying near the wall, looked once at Rowan, then lowered his head and ate. No command, no rod, no audience, just choice. Rowan stayed perfectly still, because even he knew victory was sometimes a thing you did not celebrate loudly. When Korrath finished, he looked back up at the balcony. Rowan gave a small nod. For the record, I'm counting that as your decision, not mine. The creature exhaled once, deep and controlled, and for the first time since Rowan had arrived, the chamber felt less like a cage and more like a room where someone had finally stopped shouting. By morning, Rowan Cade had written the most dangerous report of his academic career, mostly because it contained the phrase, "The asset made a voluntary decision," 3 times, and military people hated when weapons started having verbs of their own. He stood in the observation bay with his tablet tucked under one arm while handler Sira then read the report in silence. Below them, Korrath rested in the far half of the chamber, not sleeping, because Rowan had decided creatures like Korrath probably did not sleep so much as temporarily stop judging the room. Sira reached the final line and looked at him. You entered the restricted balcony after hours, Rowan nodded. Yes, without permission. That is usually what after hours means. Her scarred jaw flexed. And you claim Korrath ate because no command was issued. Rowan lifted one finger. Important correction. I claim Korrath chose to eat when no command was issued. The difference is small unless you happen to be Korrath. Sira stared down through the glass. The chamber crew says he finished the entire block. Shocking development. Living creature enjoys food more when nobody turns dinner into a hostage negotiation. You are making assumptions. Rowan tapped his tablet. No, I'm making a pattern. He ignored 12 commands yesterday, rejected the food when threatened, then ate the same food later when left alone. That's not appetite failure. That's association failure. Sira looked back at him sharply. You think every command we give him is already contaminated. Rowan's humor faded just enough for the truth to show. I think every command comes wearing the same uniform as pain. He may not hate instructions. He may hate what instructions usually mean next. Sira did not answer for a long time. Then she said, "What do you recommend?" Rowan blinked. Wow, that sounded dangerously like asking the human. Do not enjoy it. Too late. He stepped toward the glass and pointed to the lower chamber. Give him a choice interval. Same schedule, same food, same water, but no amplified command, no visible rod, no handler at the gate. Place the platform, withdraw, observe. 5 minutes. If he eats, record it as voluntary compliance, Sira frowned. And if he attacks the platform, then we learn something. That is not reassuring. Science rarely is. The first official choice interval happened that afternoon under more supervision than Rowan thought necessary for watching someone eat lunch. 3 handlers stood behind emergency glass. 2 officers monitored restraint tension. Sira controlled the platform release herself. Rowan stood beside her with his arms folded, trying to look professional and not like a man emotionally invested in a giant armored nightmare's meal schedule. The platform slid into the chamber with clean water and a nutrient block. No one spoke. Korrath's eyes opened from the dark. He looked first at the platform, then at the gate where the handlers usually stood, then up toward the observation bay. Rowan gave no signal. He only breathed slowly and waited. 30 seconds passed. 1 minute, 2. An officer muttered, "Failure." Rowan whispered, "If you rush him, I will write a very annoying appendix about you." The officer glared, but Sira raised one hand for silence. At 4 minutes and 12 seconds, Korrath rose. The chains moved softly across the stone, slack and controlled. He approached the platform, lowered his head and drank the water first. Not the food, the water. Rowan noticed Sira noticing. Korrath then ate half the nutrient block, paused, looked at the observation glass and pushed the remaining half away with one claw. An officer exhaled in disgust. "Incomplete feeding." Rowan shook his head. "No." "Boundary setting." Sira's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "He took what he wanted and left the rest. That means he understands there was no punishment for choosing less." The officer scoffed. "You are assigning intention to an animal." Korrath's 4 eyes lifted toward the observation bay, slow and cold, as if he had understood enough of the insult to file it permanently. Rowan smiled without warmth. "Careful. He may be assigning intention to you too." Over the next 3 days, the choice intervals became the one quiet thing Blackspire Hold could not explain away. Korrath ate when left uncommanded. He drank more when the water tray was placed away from the old shock gate. He stopped striking the platform. He still growled when handlers entered with rods, and he still refused every formal order, but during the silent intervals, his violence changed shape. It did not vanish. Rowan never made that mistake. Korrath remained huge, dangerous, and perfectly capable of turning a bad decision into architecture damage. But he began choosing stillness before the restraints forced it. He began watching Rowan enter the observation bay without lifting his spines. Once, when a junior handler dropped a metal clamp and flinched toward a shock control, Korrath's chest rumbled, but he did not lunge. Rowan murmured, "Look at that. Emotional growth from everyone except the guy holding the panic button." On the 4th night, Sira found Rowan alone near the lower balcony again. This time he had not entered the chamber, only sat outside the sealed maintenance glass with his tablet open and a cold cup of coffee beside him. "You are becoming a habit," she said. Rowan looked up. "I've been called worse by better furniture." She stood beside him, staring down at Korrath. "He waits for you now." Rowan did not joke immediately. Below, Korrath lay near the far wall, eyes open, body angled toward the balcony. Not trapped against the chains, not pressed against the gate, just aware. "No," Rowan said quietly. "He waits for the room to become less hostile." Sira's voice dropped. "And you think that is because of you?" Rowan shook his head. "I think I'm the only idiot consistently showing up without asking him to be useful." Sira looked at him then, and some of her hard certainty had worn thin. "If command sees this as attachment, they will end it." Rowan's mouth tightened. "Because control hates anything it didn't invent. Because a creature that chooses cannot be deployed like a weapon." Rowan looked back down at Korrath. The war creature's amber eyes reflected the dim balcony light, steady and unreadable. "Good," he said. "Maybe that's the first sane thing this place has accidentally created." The change became impossible to hide during the command demonstration. Blackspire Hold had prepared the lower arena like a courtroom with weapons. Officers stood behind reinforced observation glass. Cadets lined the upper galleries, and a delegation from Varkin Military Academy watched with the hungry patience of people waiting for proof that their theory was correct. Korrath stood in the center of the arena beneath pale restraint lights, his charcoal armor hide reflecting the glow from the command pylons. The official purpose of the demonstration was simple: determine whether the war creature's reduced aggression could be converted into usable battlefield obedience. Rowan Cade, standing near the back of the observation tier with handler Sira Ven, read that phrase on the program slate and sighed. Usable battlefield obedience, he muttered. That is a very expensive way to say they learned nothing. Sira did not look at him. Lower your voice. I am using my respectful disappointment volume. Commandant Rowan Cade entered last. He was broad, bronze-skinned, and wrapped in a black command mantle that made every junior officer straighten as if their spines had received orders. He did not glance at Rowan at first. His eyes went straight to Korrath, measuring him the way commanders measured engines, weapons, and doors they expected to open. Begin, Cade said. A handler below stepped forward without a rod, following Sira's new protocol. The feeding platform slid into the arena. No amplified command followed, no threat, no spark. Korrath watched the platform, then lowered his head and drank. The observation tier shifted with surprised whispers. Rowan folded his arms. Amazing. Living being eats when dinner stops being a hostage crisis. Someone alert science. Sira's mouth twitched once, but she killed the expression quickly. Cade did not look impressed. Proceed to command trial. Sira stiffened. Commandant, the choice intervals were not designed to transition directly into obedience testing. The Academy did not request a dining report handler. It requested operational viability. Below, 2 handlers rolled a target drone into the arena. It unfolded into a simulated infantry machine, harmless but shaped like a threat. A command officer activated the arena speaker. Korrath, strike target. Korrath looked at the drone. Then he looked at the officer. He did not move. The officer repeated the command louder. Korrath, strike. Korrath's spines lifted slightly, not toward the drone but toward the speaker. Rowan leaned forward. He knows it is not attacking. Cade finally turned his head. Cadet Cade, you are not part of this demonstration. Rowan gave a small nod. That is becoming increasingly obvious. The officer below signaled for the target drone to lunge. It moved too close to a junior technician standing near the gate, a young alien holding a diagnostic case and trying very hard not to tremble. Korrath moved instantly, not at the drone's center, not in blind aggression. He stepped between the drone and the technician, struck the machine sideways with one plated shoulder, and pinned it under one forelimb without crushing the technician or the gate equipment. The arena went silent. The junior technician dropped the diagnostic case. Korrath lowered his head, eyes burning, but he did not attack her. He only held the drone down until it stopped moving. Rowan whispered, "There, that's not obedience. That's judgment." Cade heard him. This time he turned fully. Judgment is not what we require from a siege asset. Rowan looked at the pinned drone below, then at the frightened technician still alive beside it. Then maybe stop calling him an asset before he keeps embarrassing your vocabulary. Several officers bristled. Sira stepped close to Rowan and murmured, "Careful." Rowan answered without moving his eyes from Cade. "I'm trying, but he keeps saying things that deserve consequences." Cade descended one level to the main observation rail. "You have interfered with our handling structure since your arrival." His voice carried across the chamber. "You encouraged unsupervised behavioral adaptation, weakened command response, and created unauthorized attachment." Rowan tilted his head. Unauthorized attachment. Another beautiful phrase. "Did you rehearse that in a mirror or just hate feelings naturally?" Sira's hand closed around Rowan's sleeve. Cade's eyes hardened. "You think this is humor?" Rowan's face changed then, the joke falling away. "No. I think you watched a creature protect a technician instead of destroy a target, and your first thought was how inconvenient that makes him. That is not a humor problem, Commandant. That is a leadership problem. The silence after that felt dangerous. Korrath lifted his head below, watching the rail. He had heard Rowan's voice sharpen. Everyone noticed. Kaz noticed most of all. "There," he said coldly. Attachment response. "The human has compromised the asset." Rowan glanced down. Korrath was not lunging, not roaring, only watching. "No," Rowan said quietly. "He is paying attention to who sounds like a threat." Kaz turned to Sira. Effective immediately, Cadet Cade is removed from all lower-level access. Choice intervals are suspended. Korrath returns to formal restraint protocol pending full review. Sira's face went still. "Commandant, that may undo the progress. Progress that cannot be commanded is instability." Rowan gave a humorless laugh. "There it is, the official motto of bad ideas everywhere." Two guards stepped toward him. Sira did not move, but her eyes warned him not to fight. Rowan let them take his access band. Below, Korrath rose fully, chains sliding across stone with a sound that made every officer flinch. He did not strike. He did not roar. He only stared at Rowan as the guards escorted him toward the lift. Rowan looked back through the glass and forced a crooked smile. "For the record, big guy, this is still not my worst meeting." Korrath's amber eyes stayed fixed on him until the lift doors closed. And deep inside Blackspire Hold, where old vents carried sounds the security grid ignored, something metallic began moving behind a sealed wall. Rowan Cade was halfway through being escorted back to the upper guest wing when Blackspire Hold proved, with spectacular timing, that every bad command decision eventually submitted an invoice. The lift shuddered once, hard enough that one guard slammed a hand against the wall. The red security lights blinked out, returned pale white, then shifted into a deep violet Rowan had not seen before. He looked at the ceiling. "That feels like the building just remembered a secret." The guard on his left tightened his grip on Rowan's arm. "Silence." Rowan tilted his head, listening. Beneath the lift's emergency hum was a second sound, low and rhythmic, like metal teeth turning behind stone. "No, seriously," he said, the sarcasm thinning. "Does this place have a color for ancient machinery waking up without permission?" The guard opened his mouth to answer, but the lift stopped between floors and the speaker above them crackled with Commandant Kaz's voice. "All lower-level personnel remain at stations. Formal restraint protocol is active. No unauthorized movement." Rowan stared at the speaker. That is a terrifyingly confident sentence for a man who just lost control of his own elevator. The lower floor shook again. This time the vibration came up through Rowan's boots and into his ribs. The guards exchanged one quick look, which told Rowan more than any briefing could have. They did not know what was happening either. Then Handler Sira Ven's voice cut across the emergency channel, strained but controlled. "Commandant, shut down the restraint lattice. Korrath is reacting to something below the arena wall." Kaz answered sharply. "Korrath is reacting because your choice intervals weakened obedience conditioning." Sira's voice hardened. "No, he is tracking a movement source behind sealed infrastructure." Rowan pulled against the guards. "You heard her. The giant armored lie detector is pointing at the basement." One guard raised his weapon. "You are removed from lower access." Rowan looked at him. "Friend, if your facility monster is calmer than your command staff, maybe update your priorities." The lift emergency hatch above them burst open before the guard could respond. Sira dropped through with a maintenance cutter in one hand and absolutely no patience left in her face. "Give him to me." The guard stared. "Handler Ven, he is restricted." Sira pointed the cutter at the door controls. "So is the lower arena, and yet something is opening it from the inside." Rowan gave the guards a small shrug. "I'd argue with her, but she has the tool and the healthier survival instinct." The next tremor made the lift lights flicker. The guards let go. Sira cut the lift lock, forced the doors open, and pulled Rowan into a narrow service shaft. Smoke did not fill the corridor, which Rowan appreciated because danger without smoke felt less lazy. Instead, the walls pulsed with violet lines, old circuits waking beneath newer panels. "What is that?" he asked. Sira moved fast. "Legacy command lattice, built before neural reigns." Officially sealed. I'm guessing unofficially stupid. It was designed to make siege creatures follow battlefield priority signals. Rowan's face went cold. You mean it does not command Korrath? It tells him what to fear. Sira did not answer. That was answer enough. They reached the lower observation level just as the formal restraint protocol activated fully. In the arena below, Korrath stood surrounded by 6 command pylons rising from the floor like metal spears. Violet light crawled across the restraint bands on his chest and forelimbs. He was not roaring. He was trembling with the effort not to move. Near the west maintenance gate, 3 technicians were trapped behind a jammed barrier as target drones unfolded from the walls, their recognition lights pulsing the same violet as the lattice. Rowan gripped the rail. Those drones are reading the technicians as hostile. Sira's eyes went wide. No, they are reading everything near Korrath as battlefield pressure. Rowan turned toward the control bay, where Kaz stood behind glass, issuing commands into a system that had clearly stopped listening. So the old machine thinks it is training him by making the room attack itself. Sira whispered, yes. One drone fired a stun round at a technician. Korrath moved, not toward escape, toward the round. He slammed one plated shoulder into the shot and took the impact himself. The restraint lattice punished him instantly. Violet current ran across his bands, forcing his forelimbs to buckle. Rowan's hands tightened on the rail until his knuckles hurt. He protected her. Sira nodded, shaken. Under active correction. Below, Korrath lifted his head again, eyes locked on the trapped workers. The drones repositioned. The technicians screamed for the gate to open. Kaz shouted through the arena speakers, Korrath, lower. Korrath, submit. Rowan snapped. He is already doing the one useful thing in this room. Korrath heard Rowan's voice. 4 amber eyes turned upward through the violet glow. The trembling in his body changed. Not easier, clearer. Rowan stepped to the emergency stairwell. Sira grabbed his sleeve. If you go down there, the lattice will mark you as pressure too. Rowan looked at Korrath shielding the workers while the machine punished him for it. Good. Maybe it'll finally notice someone volunteering. Sira's grip tightened. Rowan, for once he did not joke. He learned the room could be less hostile. I am not letting the room prove him wrong. He ran down before fear could file an objection. The arena gate opened just enough for him to slip through. The air inside tasted like metal and electricity. Every drone pivoted toward him. Kaz's voice roared from above. Remove that human. Rowan ignored him and walked slowly toward Korrath, both hands visible. Hey, big guy, he called, voice shaking but steady enough. Bad room again. Very bad room, but I'm here without a rod. Korrath's restraint band sparked. A drone aimed at Rowan. Korrath stepped between them, taking another hit across his armored side. Rowan swallowed hard. Yeah, he whispered. That's what I thought. Then he turned to the trapped technicians and shouted, when he moves, you run. Behind him, the first command pylon began to crack under Korrath's claws. The first command pylon cracked with a sound that made every officer in Blackspire Hold remember fear at the same time. Korrath did not roar when it broke. He did not celebrate freedom like a wild thing suddenly released. He lowered one armored shoulder, drove his claws into the arena floor, and tore the violet-lit machine out of its socket because it was between Rowan Cade and the trapped technicians. Sparks burst across his restraint bands. The old command lattice punished him again, forcing his forelimbs to shake, but Korrath stayed upright. Rowan stood beside him with both hands raised, heart hammering, trying very hard not to think about how every drone in the arena had decided he was now a high-priority problem. Okay, he said, voice rough, good news, big guy. You are officially better at ignoring bad instructions than most academy committees. A drone fired toward the technicians near the west maintenance gate. Korrath moved before Rowan did. He slammed his plated body into the shot and took the impact across his side. The force pushed him half a step, but he did not fall. Rowan turned and shouted, run now. The technicians hesitated for one terrified breath. Then Sira Ven's voice cut down from the observation level. Move. That is an order you should actually obey. They ran. Korrath shifted his body to shield them, not because Rowan commanded him, not because the lattice told him, but because he had chosen the difference between danger and helplessness. Rowan watched him step over one fallen technician without touching her, block a drone strike meant for another, and hook one pylon cable with a claw to rip it away from the exit path. "There," Rowan shouted up toward the control bay. "That is not instability, that is judgment." Commandant Rowan Cade stood behind the upper glass, face hard with fury and something close to panic. "The creature is responding to the human," Rowan laughed once, breathless and angry. "No, Commandant, he is responding to the situation. I know that is less flattering for your worldview." Cade slammed one hand against the control rail. "Activate full restraint," Sira turned on him. "If you do that, the lattice will overload every band on his body. Then the asset will submit." Sira's voice became cold enough to cut. "He is protecting your personnel. He is disobeying command." Rowan looked up at Cade, and for once there was no joke in his face. Maybe command should try being worth obeying. The second pylon broke when Korrath drove the first broken pylon into it like a club. The arena lights flickered. 2 drones lost alignment and crashed into the floor. The remaining machines turned toward Rowan, reading his movement as the center of the disruption. Korrath saw it. Rowan saw Korrath seeing it. "No," Rowan said softly. "Do not take all of it." Korrath lowered his head, amber eyes fixed on him, and for one strange second Rowan understood the answer without words. The creature had been commanded all his life. He had been shocked, restrained, corrected, and labeled dangerous every time he made a choice. Now he was making one anyway. Korrath moved. Rowan moved with him, not leading, not riding, not commanding, just trusting the direction of a creature everyone else had called uncontrollable. Together they crossed the arena toward the central lattice core. Rowan ducked under a drone burst and slid across the floor, grabbing a fallen technician's toolkit. "Sira," he shouted, "tell me this place has a manual shutdown that is not labeled press here to make things worse." Sira's voice answered over the speaker. "Central core panel, lower right side, 3 locks, wonderful." A puzzle while being shot at. Korrath planted himself between Rowan and the drones. His tail swept low, knocking one machine out of the air without crushing the unconscious guard beneath it. Rowan reached the core panel and forced the first lock open with a maintenance cutter. The second jammed. The third sparked violently. "I hate legacy systems," he muttered. A drone angled toward his back. Korrath struck it aside, but the lattice current surged again. This time he dropped to one knee. The whole arena shook. Rowan looked back. "Stay with me." Korrath's 4 eyes lifted. Rowan jammed the cutter into the second lock and twisted until the metal screamed. "You hear that? That is the sound of me voiding several warranties for friendship." The second lock broke. Sira appeared at the lower gate with 2 guards behind her. "Rowan, the third lock needs simultaneous pressure from the command rail." Rowan looked up. Cade stood frozen beside that rail. Sira turned to him. "Commandant, open it." Cade did not move. The last drone lifted toward Rowan. Then one of the rescue technicians stepped forward, shaking but alive. "Korrath saved us." Another guard lowered his rifle. "He took the shots." A third said, "The human was right." The words moved through the observation level like a chain breaking in silence. Cade looked around and saw obedience leaving him one witness at a time. Sira stepped past him, slammed her palm onto the command rail and shouted, "Now, Rowan." Rowan pulled the final lock. The violet light died. Korrath's restraint bands went dark, then fell open with a heavy sound against the arena floor. For a moment, nobody breathed. Korrath stood free in the center of Blackspire Hold, surrounded by broken drones, shattered pylons and soldiers who suddenly understood that fear had never been the same thing as truth. Cade whispered, "Resecure him." No one moved. Rowan stood beside Korrath, exhausted, bleeding from a cut over his brow and somehow still upright. "Commandant," he said, "if the first thing you do after watching him save your people is reach for chains, the problem was never him." Sira descended into the arena and stood on Korrath's other side. Korrath acted with threat distinction, restraint and protective intent. "I am entering that into the official record." Kaz stared at her. "You would side with the human." Sierra looked at Korrath, then at Rowan. "No. I am finally siding with what happened." Weeks later, the lower arena was empty. Korrath was moved to an open sanctuary yard beneath the red storms of Varnix-3, no longer classified as a siege asset, but as an allied intelligence under guarded diplomatic protocol. Rowan visited at sunset with no rods, no commands, and one terrible cup of Blackspire coffee. Korrath approached without chains and stopped beside him. Rowan held up the cup. "Trust me, you do not want this. It tastes like maintenance fluid with ambition." Korrath lowered his massive head near Rowan's shoulder and exhaled. Not obedience, not surrender, recognition. They had called Korrath a creature that ignored every command. But when the human stood beside him without asking for control, Korrath followed anyway.